Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our 8th and final video lesson about supply and demand. Today, we're going to talk about controlling quantities and this little thing called excise taxes. Excise taxes have played a pretty big role in history. Think Whiskey Rebellion for those of you who remember U.S. history. But my name is Miss Jennifer Blank. We're going to talk about why these things matter and precisely what they are. All right, so some key ideas that I want you to keep in mind. Quotas, otherwise known as quantity controls. A license, excise taxes, wedge, and excess burden, otherwise known as dead weight loss. So we're going to explore these concepts. I'm going to introduce these ideas, and then in class, we'll do a whole lot of practice. Okay, so controlling quantities. What is this all about exactly? So a quantity, not quality, quantity, so amount, control, or quota is an upper limit on the quantity of some good that can be bought or sold. The total amount of the good that can be legally transacted is the quota limit, okay? A license gives its owner the right to supply a good, and in many cases, it not only gives them the right to supply it, but it gives them a certain number that they may supply, certain amount. Example, taxi cabs. Have you ever heard of, like, in New York City, you need a medallion, right? Well, that's part of what this is. The medallion is effectively the license of the taxi cab driver in New York City. All right, so let's take a look at an example. Let's look at the market for taxi rides without government control. So again, we're looking at free market, invisible hand at work. Government isn't messing with it at all, okay? So here's our diagram. We have our equilibrium. We have our supply and demand schedules over there, and we have our graph, right? So equilibrium is 10 million rides per year at $5 a ride, right? There's our equilibrium, good times. Without government intervention, the market reaches equilibrium with 10 million rides taken per year at a fare of $5. Okay? Now, let's see if when the government institutes a quota, what the effect of that is for the market of taxi rides. Let's see what happens. So we have our supply and demand schedules over there. Let's draw this out and see what happens. There's our equilibrium. What happens with a quota? What does the quota do? Oh, there's a brand new line, Miss Blank. What are you doing to me? What are you doing to me? You're killing me. I don't know what this line is. Does not make sense to me. All right, let's talk about it, right? So the quota, this is the limit. So let's say the equilibrium is 10 million rides, right? It's 10 million rides, but then the government says, no. You can only give 8, right? What is that going to do to the market? This is the wedge, the difference between how much they would have charged and how much they now have to charge. This is the difference, okay? So, you have your quantity demanded at 8, the quantity supplied is 8. But if the quantity demanded of 8 million, it's going to be $6. Quantity supplied, 4. So what is this? What does this mean, this concept of a wedge? Quota drives a wedge between demand price, the price paid by buyers, and the supply price, the price received by sellers of a good. So now you're asking, well, who gets the difference? Well, the difference between the demand and supply price is the quota rent, the earnings that accrue to the license holder from the ownership of the right to sell the good. So let's go back to this little graph. So this is what the this is what the customer pays, okay? They pay $6, right? This is what the taxi driver makes. The difference is what the cab company makes. Okay, because most taxi drivers are not sole proprietors, right? They're not operating their own business, okay? They are working under someone else's license. And this is basically the quota rent they pay. That $2 is the quota rent they pay to operate under that license, okay? It's equal to the market price of the license when the licenses are traded. Like price controls, quantity controls create inefficiencies and encourage illegal activity, namely for people to buy their own cabs and operate without a medallion, outside the realm of regulation, which is illegal in New York City, by the way. Excise taxes. Those are taxes on the purchase or sale of a good, okay? They have effects similar to quotas. They raise the price paid by buyers and reduce the price paid by sellers, and they drive a wedge between the two. Think of, like, and you've got like a little doorstop, right? And you stick it in the door to keep it from closing. Well, that doorstop is effectively the wedge. It's stopping the door from closing, from meeting the door jamb. It's keeping the door open. If you took away the doorstop, the door would close, right? If you took that away. But since that wedge is there, that doorstop is there, the door stays open artificially. Excise taxes levied on the sale of taxi rides, and excise taxes levied on the purchases of taxi rides. So let's look at this. Sales versus purchases. Let's take a look. Effect of an excise tax. What happens? Blowing your mind here. I can tell already if you haven't fallen asleep yet. All right, let's keep on keeping on. All right, so here we have our equilibrium. Remember, this is the original spot we started out with. Free market, all things equal. If the government stays out of it and everybody else stays out of it, you just let the market do its thing. This is where we're at. 10 million rides, $5 piece. Ooh, a supply curve shifts upward based on the amount of the tax. Isn't that interesting? So this excise tax is actually shifting the curves. Ooh, interesting. So look at what we have here. The excise tax is $2 per ride. All right, this is what people pay. This is what sellers get. And guess who gets the difference? Ooh, the government. Isn't that nice? Isn't that special? Government gets that madness. Let's look at the purchases, right? Ooh, lowers that demand. Oh, dang snap. So demand curve shifts downward. It decreases the demand for said taxi rides. People are like, you know what? Forget this madness. I'm going to walk, right? I'm going to take the subway. Forget this taxi business. And here we go. Again, with the excise tax. Like I said, who gets that tax? The government. So they love them some excise taxes. So the incidence of a tax is a measure of who really pays it. Okay? Who really bears the burden? Higher prices to consumers, lower prices to sellers. Doesn't depend on who officially pays the tax. Okay? Depending on the shapes of supply and demand curves, the incidence of an excise tax may actually divide differently. It doesn't mean that, oh, okay, the seller bears 50% of that tax and the buyer bears. No. It could be completely unequal, depending on how the tax works. Now you should be drawing conclusions. Now you should be, stop, let's think about this. Okay, so an excise tax causes a wedge, right? This is a problem, right? And consumers pay more and sellers make less. But how much more consumers pay and how much less sellers make depends on how the government designs that tax. So if we as consumers are not voting, or not paying attention, or not participating, do you think that that tax is going to be shaped to help the consumer? No, it's not. You know it's going to be shaped to help? The business, because the businesses are paying attention. The wedge between the demand price and the supply price becomes the government's tax revenue in an excise tax, which we already discussed. So, revenue from an excise tax. Look at this. We got this. $2 per ride. Right, that's what they're getting. This area, this little square here, this green little square, is the revenue that the government gets from the tax, right? So the area of the shaded triangle represents the number of rides and the amount of money they're going to make. 8 million rides, the government is about taking 16 million bucks. Ooh, 16 million bucks that could have been in your pocket, could have been in the seller's pocket, right? And the government gets it instead. Excise taxes also cause inefficiency. Okay, they cause an excess burden, or otherwise known as a deadweight loss. This excess burden or deadweight loss means that the true cost is always larger than the actual amount paid in taxes. They prevent transactions from happening because I would pay at $5, but because now it's $6, I'm not even taking a cab anymore. I'm a walk, right? And sellers who would have provided rides at $5 are like, $4? Forget that. I'm selling my cab. I'm going to go do something else. So now transactions that would have been good for the economy that would have occurred are now not happening anymore. They don't exist anymore, okay? Because it's costing people too much money to engage in the trade. The transaction costs are simply too much for many people to engage. So it's completely removing exchanges that would have occurred. It also, like we've established previously, encourages illegal activity in attempts to avoid said tax. People will find a way around it. That is the end of supply and demand. We are going to practice all of these things in class. I will see you all in the next unit. It's been real.